Hi, I'm Tom Campbell from Cultaholic, and I'm taking on a case that wrestling scholars, sports entertainment sleuths, and gumshoes of the graps have left unsolved. And this is not a matter that we're gonna pie off. It was the 4th of July 2016, and Monday Night Raw, emanating from Columbus, Ohio, was hosting a cook-off with many members of the WWE roster. And as these things tend to do, it turned into a big old food fight. Kevin Owens, once the consumable carnage had curtailed, emerged from under one of the picnic tables. In doing so, he took a pie to the face from an unknown assailant. Kevin Owens has never named who his attacker was. In interviews, he has been approached about the identity of who was the confectionery clouter, and he gave an answer that made the waters murkier. It made the eaten messier. He said, and I quote, "The only answer I can give people is that in the end, even if it wasn't him who physically did it, the one who ultimately threw the pie was Vince McMahon, because he's the one that decided the pie was going to hit me in the face. Like a wooden spoon in a rocky road, that just won't cut it." Kevin Owens is keeping the secrets of his assailant very much close to his heart. However, we are going to search further to get the real answer. Who threw the pie at Kevin Owens on Monday Night Raw in 2016? So in order to find out who pied the prize fighter, we need to examine the suspects, namely all of the people who were present at that very food fight. Now, who among them could loathe Kevin Owens enough to want to plant a pie firmly between his ears? Well, we're not quite sure you noticed if you were watching at the time, but Kevin Owens didn't have a whole lot of friends at this point. Some would call him a colossal dickbag in 2016. He has since repaired a lot of burnt bridges, stunned his way into our hearts, but yeah, at this point, I think everybody very actively disliked Kevin Owens. And there were a lot of people there that could have surely been behind the pieing. The Dudley Boys, the Usos, Enzo and Big Cass, the New Day, Chris Jericho, Sami Zayn, Becky Lynch, Summer Rae, Sheamus, Cesaro, Curtis Axel, Heath Slater. It really could have been any of them. I mean, had Mr. Rogers, the Dalai Lama and Kermit the Frog all been there, they probably would have had a go as well. Kevin Owens didn't really get on with anybody at this point, as we've already said. However, we need to narrow down these suspects a little bit more when you consider the positioning of all the pies. So this is quite a visual episode of Solved, so you're going to have to look very closely at the picture here. So a panoramic scan of the scene shows that yes, there were 10 pies visible during the mostly peaceful chowdown, right? None of which had been disturbed. Now, that all changed when Bubba Ray flung one of the 10 pies into the face of Aiden English. From there, The Miz doused in chocolate syrup, courtesy of the fashion police. Unclear why they disapprove of him wearing all white, particularly as Labour Day wasn't for 2 more months. From there, the mostly calm feast turned into a chaotic fray. We saw food flung to and fro across the dining room, and that is where the pies begin to get flung, right? So before we get into the order of pie elimination, right, let us examine which wrestlers were closest to the desserts when the madness began. So we can immediately disqualify Bubba Ray, since his pie had been used to pie Aiden English. That leaves 9 yet to be defiled baked goods that will soon find themselves getting randomly tossed around like company buzzwords. Now, only difference here being that the pies would actually stick. It's a good little joke what I did there. And just who were the 9 individuals who had the easiest access to the pies? Now, the pies were closest to Curtis Axel, to Primo Cologne, to Summer Rae, to Heath Slater, to Sami Zayn, Kalisto, Enzo Amore, Dana Brooke, and Sheamus, okay? Now, on the surface, none of these suspects can be immediately ruled out. This is due to any positive connections with Owens, because certainly there were none. He wasn't very popular. But the question is, would any of them go out of their way to make sure that Owens got his just desserts. Let's take a look at the physical evidence. So the barrage of pie chucking, sort of very early on in the fracas, saw Dana Brooke and Curtis Axel both throw pies. This probably rules out both of them from the get-go. So, see, most of the participants of the food fight stayed in their general seating area, so there wasn't a whole lot of moving around. So I think we can rule out Dana Brooke and Curtis Axel from there. Good job. All right, and the next pie that wielded its doom was the one wielded by Enzo Amore. Now, we see Amore looking to send this dish bada-booming into someone's kisser when Bo Dallas approaches from behind the punch bowl, right? Hoping to drench Enzo completely. Now, that is where Big Cass springs into action, saving his little buddy, causing Dallas to douse himself with the contents. By the time that Enzo has turned to acknowledge Dallas, the pie is now gone. Okay? You stay with me? This is wild times. Right. So, the camera then whips around quite wildly at this point. This is, you know, I think Kevin Dunn calls this steady setting. It's hard to really make heads or tails of what's happening. There's a lot of moving parts going on here. But the next thing that we see, we're able to determine, though, is that Summer Rae has been pied, and then the pie nearest to her is missing. Then we have to deduce that she ended up wearing the pie. So either that or the custard on her face is actually one of those sort of garish makeup schemes that you see advertised on Instagram sometimes. We'll just assume that it was an aggressive pieing. That's what we'll do. So 2 more pies are now noticeably missing. Keep up. The ones in the vicinity of Kalisto and Primo. With so much going on, it is very likely that we just missed those pies out. Or maybe they were eaten. Maybe they were sent down to NXT to learn how to work. Could be either of those. Maybe they just got a phone call from AEW. That's quite likely as well. Look, whatever happened, those pies are no longer there. They're removed from the equation, and we're probably able to safely remove Kalisto and Primo as suspects as well, since they were nearest to them. That brings us down to 3 pies. Sheamus, Sami Zayn, and Heath Slater. They are the closest individuals to said pies. Heath Slater's would take himself out of the picture, and out of favour, Big Show and Kane. Slater then found himself enduring a chokeslam through one of the dining tables, so taking 2 pies with him as collateral damage. So Sheamus was approximate to one of those pies. We could probably rule out Sheamus at this point as well. That leaves 1 pie. If you kept up all this way, you deserve a big old kiss. So it just so happens it is the pie on the edge of the table that Kevin Owens is seated under. So one must assume this was the pie that ended up KOing KO, right? Now, that leaves 1 prime suspect out of everybody, out of all that we've just gone through there, and that's Sami Zayn, the man for whom Kevin Owens, at times, was seemingly destined to fight forever, and in some cases still very much is so. Would Sami Zayn food fight forever? Pay close attention to the beans. When the mayhem begins to kick off, right? Sami Zayn is shuffling across the room. We see him there. Giant bowl of beans, warning his fellow picnickers to not eat the beans, as they may have been contaminated, all right? Zayn tries to carry the beans off to where he can properly dispose of them at this point, only for him to be super kicked by Dolph Ziggler, sending the beans scattering everywhere. Zayn is knocked to the floor from the kick, and thereby, it's seemingly completely removed from the food fight, able to crawl to safety at the very least. His very subtle escape, it takes about 45 seconds before Heath Slater was slammed through the table, at which time, like, all eyes were on poor Heath Slater's peril. Nobody was watching anywhere else. And when the camera pans around, which are everybody laughing at Slater's rather painful predicament, the pie sitting on Owens' table is gone. Right? Did you see it? It's gone. From the look of things, Sami Zayn is the only one left in the room. That leads to the burning question. Did Sami Zayn take the pie with him when he left the room? Only 1 pie remaining. One has to assume that this was the one that hit Kevin Owens right in the mush. One has to assume that the cold-blooded pie phantom flan flinger was, of course, that man there, Sami Zayn. Now, we have to believe that the pie had left the room, because when the pie was on the table, it had no toppings, it was unadorned. Yet when it came back, the pie in Owens' face had sprinkles on it. The only undamaged pie was removed from the tray, topped with sprinkles, and brought back into the room. And who could have brought it back into the room? Who was meticulous enough to do that? How about the same bugger that hired 3 mustachioed men to play Bobby Lashley's sisters? So, Sami Zayn crawled out of the room after taking a super kick. In doing so, took time to go around the room, remove the pie from Kevin Owens' table, cover it in sprinkles, bring it back into the room, and pie Kevin Owens with it. Did Sami Zayn throw the pie at Kevin Owens? Did Sami Zayn throw the pie at Kevin Owens? You've got to believe that he did. But why? Why did Kevin Owens not tell us? Owens and Sami Zayn have a fraught relationship, and they partnered up soon after this. Maybe Kevin Owens realised that if the man has time to decorate a pie in the middle of a food fight, he is not one to be messed with. We would see throughout history Kevin Owens and Sami Zayn constantly at loggerheads. It would explain why Kevin Owens takes great joy in beating up Sami Zayn publicly, but on this particular occasion has never snitched on Sami Zayn for his crime brulee. There's a clear, weird friendship between the two. Whilst he is happy to beat up Sami Zayn on the quiet, maybe this occasion he wants to keep it on the QT. Sami Zayn is the man who threw the pie at Kevin Owens. Sami Zayn, you are a diabolical yet delicious deed doer. Well, that was fun. That was exciting. Built up a sweat doing that, and my Fitbit reckons I've done 4,000 steps. If you have an unsolved case file, let me know in the comments below, and I may be dusting it off in a future video. My name is Tom Campbell from Cultaholic, and I will see you next crime.